Another exciting episode here on the Professional Edge. My name's Todd, tax attorney, CPA, and certified financial planner. What we're talking about is what's the plan for 2024. Let's think about this for a second. We talked about some estate planning concepts in session 1, 2, and then 3, we talked about a little bit of financial planning on that side and protecting your capital. Well, think about this for a second. What if we put in place a mechanism that said, hey, if things slide by, call it 5%, then you're out of the market. It becomes an unemotional decision. Now, when we put that in there, it's going to be a sale or disposition. So, is the taxable event going to be worth the saving of your capital? And that's where we put on our CPA hat and our financial advisory hat and run the analysis for the client. Because in retirement, a lot of times it becomes more important to have a return of the principal than a return on the principal. Let me say that one more time. It's more important to have a return of the principal than a return on the principal. So if you, like many others, are sort of concerned, we heard recession all in 2023, and the market did very well in 2023, and investors were rewarded. That was following a terrible year in 2022 that had the NASDAQ down 30%, the S&P was down 20%, and even the bond sector was down 10%. The only place to hide in 2022 was in cash. So in 2023, the turnaround, hopefully you didn't sell out and park everything in cash in 2022 after that abysmal year, because 2023 rebounded significantly and everything was positive. So now we have hit about 6 all-time highs in the S&P 500 index for the start of 2024. Now, if that gives you reason for a pause and you have not protected your principal, and let's think about this for a second. Your stock that you own, a share of Home Depot, for example, there's no downside protection, meaning your gains are not locked in. The only way you can lock in those gains is if you sell that stock or you place in what is called a limit order, which says, if this thing falls 5%, I'm out, I sell X number of shares, period. That's one way to protect your principal. But you got to understand the protection of principal would cause a sale or disposition. Then the Internal Revenue Service would be sitting there with their hand open saying, give us our fair share of those long-term, short-term capital gains. So it might not be the best place to put those limit orders in. So therefore, let's turn over to your qualified account and let's assess whether this makes financial sense or not to lock in some of these proceeds. If the market should have some anomaly, some large correction, you could place it at 10%, 15%, 20%, or 5%, whatever you want on the price adjustment. Put these in place, and now you have a conservation of your principal. And that is a very important thing to consider as a investor. Now, your 1-800 firm is not going to go through this entire analysis because they're not licensed to give tax advice. Yeah, they can do it. Are they going to recommend it? No, but they will follow your orders. So what orders are you going to give them, or would you want to work with a licensed professional that is A, qualified to give tax advice, is a tax attorney, a certified financial planner, and works as a registered investment advisor, which has a fiduciary duty to act in the client's best interest at all times? Well, that's us at Estate Management Counselors. So to start that conversation, you can give our office a call at 877-654-9798. That number again, 877-654-9798. The other way that you can protect your principal is to actually take some chips off the table. Remember Kenny Rogers? He said basically in his famous song, know when to hold 'em, know when to fold 'em, and know when to walk away, and know when to run. Well, we're not wanting to run from investing, so let's take a look at know when to hold them. Yes, when the market's returning positive, it's easy to hold it because everything's going up. It's calm seas. Every month we get a new increase in value in our portfolio. Know when to walk away. Well, that's when you say, you know what, enough's enough. I'm going to reduce down my market risk in my portfolio, especially as I approach retirement, or if I'm in retirement. Let's allocate these to less volatile investments and make that reallocation, and let's see what we need to do there. So again, working with a licensed professional that has a fiduciary duty to act in the client's best interest, there's nothing to sell on a commission basis. So therefore, any of these changes is not to generate income. It's A, the preservation of capital. That's number one. And number two, to make this account grow for our clients. That's the other objective that we have. Because everyone likes to make more money, but they do not like the risk when they have a decrease in their value of their portfolio. So let's talk about one mechanism. It's a tool. We have advised clients on these for nearly 2 decades, and they are called a fixed annuity. So what is a fixed annuity? It's actually a contract with an insurance company, which again, your funds that you post with them or deposit with them is the return of that principal is based on the claims paying ability of that insurance company. Now, a fixed annuity works a lot like a CD, and it says, you know what, you can have a 1-year fixed annuity, a 2, 3, 4, 5, 6-year fixed annuity. And it basically says we have a contract with the insurance company. I'm going to give you $100,000, and you're going to give me 5% per year for the next 5 years. At the end of 5 years, then I can either A, take all my money without penalty, or B, I can then reinvest those monies. Now, one good thing about a fixed annuity is that that growth inside there, that 5%, is tax deferred. So we're not taxing on it until we take it out, sort of like an IRA account. So this can grow for the next 5 years. You're not going to pay tax on it. But if you surrender it, now the difference that you're going to collect, let's call it $25,000, then that would be 100 would come in income tax free. That's a return of your capital. And then the growth on that, the $25,000, is actually interest income that you've been credited. That would be taxable if you just surrendered that annuity. Or you could roll that into a new annuity and not pay tax on the $25,000. So again, you have this rolling sort of fixed annuity, sort of like rolling CDs. But the downside on that CD is you are paying tax along the way. So that's a difference. So let's think about this for a second. Another tool, you've heard individuals talk about this. It's an annuity. Yes, it's an equity indexed annuity. So what actually is this mechanism? Well, again, it's a contract with an insurance company, and equity index. It basically says, yes, you have a fixed account, which means that your principal is 100% protected, and it is not subject to any market risk at all. The equity index part is how they determine how much interest you are credited to your value. So with this, there could be, for example, like a participation rate. And it could be 100% participation rate of the S&P 500 index, but you have a cap of 10%. So in this case, an example might be that if the S&P goes up to 12%, then you would only get 10% because you're capped out at that 10%. But if the S&P 500 index received a 7% positive rate of return, you would only get credited 7%. So you participate 100% up to the 10%. Now, if there's a participation rate of 80% in our example, then you would only get 80% of the 8%, so you would get 6.4%. So inside here, there are contracts and there's terms and conditions within inside these. So you got to evaluate whether this is a 100% participation rate up to a cap, or is it a decreased participation rate, let's say 80% or 70% with no cap going forward. So if the market did return 20%, you would participate 70% up to that 20%, so you would get a credit of 14%. And yes, this gets complicated, but again, this is a tool to be used in the right place at the right time. It's not a silver bullet to put all your money into, but it's something to consider, because it's basically taken some chips off the table. You want to participate when the market goes up, never when it goes down. So that's another point of this equity index annuity. If the market has an adjustment of 20% or 30% like we had in 2022, then your account actually loses no value. The interest that you've been credited is yours to keep as well. So therefore, there's no downside risk. Well, that is if the market decreases. The downside risk is if you have, for example, the participation rate of 100% up to 10%, and the S&P 500 index does 20%, you only get credited 10%. So the downside risk is you do not get all the upside return when the market has. But in certain circumstances, I would be okay with a portion of the portfolio being in one of these to where, your top return is going to be 10%, but you know what? If there's a correction, you don't lose any of your principal. And our investment wizard, one of the greatest investors of all time, Warren Buffett, had 2 rules of investing. Rule number 1 was, don't lose your capital. And that sort of coordinates with this equity index annuity. You can't lose your capital to market risk. And then rule number 2 of Warren Buffett was, do not forget rule number 1. So think about that. The legendary investor who is worth north of $80 billion. I think he's in that 100 billion range. I haven't checked lately. Depends on the share of Berkshire Hathaway on the valuation of that. So he says, rule number 1, don't lose your capital. Well, this coincides in that. You cannot lose your capital based on market risk. A number 2 rule is, don't forget number 1. So with a portion of your portfolio, the question that I posed to you, being a financial advisor, tax attorney, and certified financial planner is, what have you put in place to protect your investment principal? Think about that for a second. What have you put in place to protect your investment principal? If you have a life cycle fund, that is subject to market risk. If you have stocks, bonds, mutual funds, those are all subject to market risk. So what have you actually protected from market risk? That would be cash or a fixed annuity, or it would be a equity index annuity or a fixed index annuity. 2 terms meaning the same thing. So again, as you evaluate your plan for 2024, I challenge you to sit back, look at your investment portfolio and say, what have I protected from downside risk? We can put in there some limit orders to protect that. That's number 1. Or number 2, you just say, you know what? I'm going to take $200,000 of my $1 million IRA rollover, and I'm going to place this in an investment, basically an equity index annuity, which says I cannot lose my $200,000. Any gain that I get credited gets locked in and I cannot lose that gain. That's something for consideration. Again, it has to be the right thing for the client in their best interest, being a fiduciary. So again, to have that conversation, give our office a call at 877-654-9798. That number again, 877-654-9798. I appreciate your time listening to The Professional Edge. My name's Todd. Make it a great week.
We've all thought about it. Everyone listening will need one. Not having one can cause untold heartache, family conflict escalating to the point of a lawsuit. One simple thing that avoids all that: an effective estate plan. As a practicing tax attorney, Todd with Estate Management Counselors has completed over 1,000 estate plans during his 15 years of professional practice. He can help you implement an effective estate plan, coordinate your financial accounts, and make sure you have named the proper beneficiaries to maximize your tax savings. Call 877-654-9798 today and let tax attorney Todd help you implement an effective estate plan. Call 877-654-9798 today. As a tax attorney CPA for over 15 years, Todd has implemented over 1,000 individual estate plans. He has recently authored an especially helpful guide, How to Unlock the Ultimate Estate Plan. This guide has helped many individuals to understand the benefits of an estate plan and how to avoid unintended disasters. has made every attempt to write this in plain English. To receive this valuable guide, How to Unlock the Ultimate Estate Plan, call 1-877-654-9798 $1,998 and request your complimentary copy today, or by emailing your request to info@emcadvisors.net.